There could be some changes coming to the transfer portal. What do you need to know to be as informed as possible for the future of college football? My man right alongside me to break it all down, Portal Pete Nicholson, brother. How we doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
It's so awesome to have you like sitting next to me and not in that monitor right there, and we're actually like having
It's
this discussion.
nice.
It's beautiful.
Nice. It's new.
It's awesome.
It's
Nashville
very
been good to you
different.
so far?
Oh, it's been great. It's been great. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here,
Yeah.
man. Well, awesome. We'll break it all down right now, but before you do that, before you listen to the rest of this video, make sure you subscribe to the On3 YouTube channel. Again, college football is in an ever-changing state. Be as dialed in as possible by being subscribed here, so you also get all the content from my man, Portal Pete Nicholson. So, Pete, I'm just going to lay it out as broad as possible. What is potentially going on with the transfer portal in terms of how it could look different going forward?
Yeah, so we're used to this 45-day transfer portal right now, right? You get 30 days in the winter, 15 in the spring. That was new last year. It used to be 60 days. Well, now what's on the table is the NCAA FBS oversight group is looking at moving from 45 to 30 days. And the way you would get from there, JD, is you would just completely axe the spring portal.
Whoa.
So you would just have 30 days in the winter. And guess what? Coaches love it. But at the same time, a lot of people I talk to are very they're not so certain it's going to be great long term because just you wait, JD, you could get some lawsuits popping up because then you're really restricting when athletes can enter the transfer portal.
I was going to say, if I'm like a quarterback battling for a job, I got 1 year of eligibility left, and I find out I didn't win the job in the spring, it's like, whoa, okay, well, I would jump in the portal, but now I can't. Is that something that you think – you said lawsuits could be in play here. I guess what would be the next step if lawsuits became a thing? Could we see a wide open college football free agency kind of deal?
So this is definitely a conversation right now about moving from 45 to 30. There's expected to be another meeting in September to talk about it. And then the NCAA Division I Council won't vote until October. So by no means is this a done deal. I think that it's really going to go under the microscope in the next 90 days, 60 days actually. And I think that, I think lawsuits, I think when we talk about lawsuits and things like that, moving to 30 days really restricts how much movement an athlete can make. And when you talk to coaches and general managers and personnel staffers, the reason why they like the move, right, is we talk so much about NIL and things like that right now. The spring portal has kind of become known for that is the time when a guy maybe says, hey, would like to get paid a little bit much more now moving into the season. But the collective's like, well, we just made sure we paid you $100,000 more in December so you wouldn't go. And those are kind of like the situations these players and these programs and collectives, it's a little triangle they get into. So I think that's a big reason why at the top levels of the sport, they would love to move away from the spring portal window. At the same time, though, the spring portal window has become this time of the year where schools can really push guys out if they need roster space, scholarship space. It's another time to really add depth, right? You think about that winter portal, that's when you go add your starting quarterback. That's when you go get a playmaking wide receiver. That's when you go get the starting left tackle. You're not really going to get that in the spring. This 23-24 portal cycle we just saw, the talent level was not there in the spring. So those are all kind of things that are on the table right now.
And that's one of those things, too, to your point about NIL. We saw Brian Kelly say, hey, we're not going to shell out X amount of dollars to bring somebody in here. And, I know that kind of was met with some mixed emotions, but I think for some of us, we're like, I wouldn't – I mean, I guess there's supply and demand conversations to be had there, but if you don't feel like the quality meets that price point, you're entitled to do that.
Exactly.
I saw Andy Staples tweet something out that I thought was intriguing and something where I was like, I don't know what that means. I wonder if Pete can make this make sense to me. Okay. He said something to the effect of, when we have lawsuits involved, you could see a situation where the powers that be overplay their hand, and then there's just no portal windows. Then it's just everybody just free for all, and we could see transfers, essentially anytime. Is that in play, or is that the worst case scenario?
So these are all hypotheticals, right? So I think the best way to break it down is, if people remember this last December, I believe it was a basketball player filed a lawsuit in West Virginia that involved the school and they had transferred right before the season. They couldn't play. Long story short, though, the NCAA was served a preliminary injunction, and because of that, now we have this free multi-time transfer rule where you now have schools have no control over athletes, how many times they can go into the portal, right? So entering this year, if a quarterback's already transferred twice, well, guess what? He can transfer a third time, and he's not going to have to get that waiver or have to sit out a year. Okay, that is a direct antitrust lawsuit that the NCAA decided to settle and make changes over, so then they didn't end up like really getting just pounded in court.
Yeah.
Okay, so you look at something like that. Well, when you factor in the transfer portal, okay, the hypothetical now is if the NCAA really, tries to put really tough parameters on when a guy can go in the portal. Well, what if you enter a similar lawsuit to what we saw, and it's kind of over the regulation of when athletes can and cannot enter the free agency that we know about. And then you look at something like that, and that's when, if the NCAA loses that, then that's when the avenue opens of like a guy can go in whenever he wants. So the NCAA is kind of playing like with fire here.
Yeah.
I think it was definitely floated for a reason on Friday to just kind of get the word out and for a reaction. I think that there's still a road ahead. I won't be stunned if it gets shot down just because of, all the after effects and impacts it could have, and doesn't make the most sense for the NCAA. But when you talk to people right now, it's really clear, like in the college football world, they would love to not have to deal with like trying to retain their roster after the fact. And I'll give one more example. I know I'm rambling.
I love it. I'm
so,
a sponge to this info.
We saw the Miami, Ohio coach Chuck Martin, right?
Yep.
And Alabama coach Kalen DeBoer kind of didn't get in it, but there's some barbs traded last week about the Lou Groza Award winner Graham Nicholson. So Graham Nicholson entered the portal in December. Chuck Martin told me last month that he almost went to Oregon. Okay, but Miami got enough funds together, whatever, to get him to stay, and he withdrew from the portal. Okay, so Chuck Martin and the Miami Redhawks thought they were in good shape. Well, they go through spring practice, and Graham Nicholson goes back in the portal, and he transfers to Alabama. So in a hypothetical world, Graham Nicholson would be a part of the Miami Redhawks program this fall if the spring portal doesn't exist.
Interesting. The old double dip from Graham.
Yeah.
And you guys say, I'm going to see him test one more time and see what I can get.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, and this is the part that is like a totally other discussion outside of the portal, but you're like, man, in some ways, it's hard to blame the kid because you're kind of like, man, I mean, you're able to maximize your earning potential at a point where who knows what the future holds for you as a kicker, and I don't know what his NFL prospects look like, but like you can cash in right now when it comes to supply and demand, like more power to you to some degree.
Yeah. 100%.
So it's interesting.
Let's also break down the 2JD about like what the portal is going to look like.
Please.
With the 45 days. So it's going to open December 9th, the day after Selection Sunday, when we find out this 12-team bracket that we're all excited about. And it'll close January 7th. Now, the one caveat to all of that is we know that postseason goes longer now.
Yep.
So, I don't know, let's say an Alabama and Ohio State, someone like that gets all the way to the semifinals or the national championship. Yeah. Those players, once their season is officially over, they'll have a 5-day window to go into the portal. So when people freak out on social media about what happens to the postseason and stuff like that, those guys will have 5 days. The other interesting thing that we saw play out a lot this past year was when a coach is fired or they leave.
It just kept resetting.
Yeah, the portal opens for 30 days. So, like, funny example for me, I thought we were done with the portal in the wintertime, and then Jim Harbaugh went to the Chargers. And that was like, all right, we're going to have the portal through February. So those are things that fans need to kind of keep an eye on and watch this season.
It's so interesting because, like you mentioned, kind of retraining our brain to it's almost like the shot clock reset whenever a coach would leave or a coach takes another job or I guess they get fired. That would happen earlier, I guess, in the cycle. But that whole world we're living in now
is soccer last year. I mean, that opened the portal in the middle of the season.
It's so wild. Is there a world where we could just see the window shrinking even more? Because, like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, it makes a lot of sense to go to a week to jump into the portal because it feels like a lot of these guys probably know around October, maybe November when they're going to jump in. They're probably going to leave. Like, I don't need 7 days to decide where. We hear Lincoln Riley talking about taking 24 hours to take the USC job we leave Oklahoma, whether that's true or not for us to talk about. But When it comes to shrinking the windows, is that something that's being talked about, like even more so than it already is being discussed right now?
So no, and the reason why it's not going to be shrunk anymore is not because guys need so much time to make a decision. I mean, some do. I mean, that's factually true. But the other thing is you got to go through compliance, right? Compliance needs at least like 24 to 48 hours to like formalize the paperwork. So let's say you are one of the guys who needs 10 to 15 days. Well, even then, you're probably going to need a little bit of time to show up in the portal. So I don't think we'll ever see something shorter than 30 days, which is what's being talked about now. But I guess we'll wait and see.
One more question for you. We're talking about new college football we're living in, the playoffs expanding, games are going longer. We got the longest college football season of all time, to my knowledge. How do you think that will impact the portal? Because I'm sitting here, I'm like, let's say a G5 App State or a Boise State goes on a run. If I am one of the premier players on those teams and we're playing past the portal entry date, quote unquote, which would be amazing, by the way, it'd be a great story, probably would see some guys maybe check in with other schools and see if they can earn more money or whatever. How do you think this new playoff format impacts our portal?
We don't know for sure yet. I mean, one thing that just immediately pops in my mind is like, okay, if you're the G5 team and you're the 12 seed and you're playing a 5 seed that you just really believe that they're like ultimately the better team. And you're like, hey, we get to play in the postseason, but we might lose by 60 points. What if your player knows he's going to go in the portal and says, hey, I'm announcing I'm going to go in the portal after this game and tries to show out in the college football playoff? I know it sounds silly, but like it's I mean, and you know, the other thing too is we all like to talk about right now about there's more avenues to get in the playoff, and it's great for the sport. It also means the other bowl games probably have either more or less value than ever. So I won't be surprised if we see more people announcing in November they're hitting the portal. So those are things I'm going to watch.
It's crazy. It's funny because you're like, it sounds silly right now, and it's like, it also sounded silly 10 years ago to skip a bowl game. And then everybody started doing it like it was in vogue. Pete Nakos, best in the business, covering the transfer portal, covering sports business, covering anything that lives and breathes under the On3 umbrella. Pete, glad to have you in National, man. Thanks for making time.
Appreciate it, JD.
Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.